welcome. I'm James Zimoha. You're watching Africa News. Let's see your headlines. 2 people have been killed in Kenyan protests over a US-backed Ebola quarantine facility. Benin's president visits Niger for talks on easing tensions and boosting regional cooperation. And Africa's fuel crisis drives renewed calls for energy self-sufficiency. Now, 2 people have been shot dead in Kenya following protests against a US-backed plan to establish a proposed Ebola quarantine facility in central Kenya. The proposal has sparked public anger, a court case and street demonstrations, with locals saying they fear the facility could put the community at risk.
Hundreds of people protested in Nanyuki, central Kenya on Monday, against plans to establish an Ebola quarantine facility at a nearby military base. The demonstrations brought parts of the town to a standstill, with protesters burning tyres, blocking roads and chanting "one term" as they marched through the streets. Police in anti-riot gear were deployed as tensions grew. Residents say they reject the proposed quarantine centre and do not want it placed near their community.
We are not happy with the national government and the leaders of Laikipia County, all elected leaders. There is none that has shown up for the protest, because this is a great tragedy not only for Kenya, but the whole continent of Africa.
The planned facility has been described in reports as a 50-bed quarantine centre for US citizens who may have been exposed to Ebola. Kenya's High Court has temporarily suspended the plan after legal challenges raised concerns over public health risks and consultation.
A global push to counter the deadly Ebola strain is gathering pace, with new funding aimed at speeding vaccine development as health agencies respond to an outbreak in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation says it will provide roughly $60 million to Moderna and 2 other groups to accelerate vaccines for the Ebola strain behind an outbreak in Eastern DRC. The CEPI officials says vaccine candidates could be ready for trials within a couple of months, though security conditions in Eastern Congo may complicate testing. Cases have also been reported in Uganda. Now, still in DRC, health workers are rebuilding an Ebola treatment center after it was attacked and set on fire by protesters. Officials warn that fear and misinformation are hampering efforts to contain the outbreak.
Burned beds and mattresses remain scattered across an Ebola treatment centre in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Workers are now rebuilding the facility in Rwampara district, near the outbreak's epicentre in the city of Bunia. The medical centre was attacked on May 21st. Protesters angry over the burial of an Ebola victim stormed the hospital and set parts of it on fire. Doctors say the violence was driven by fear and a lack of understanding about the disease. Some patients fled treatment centres during the unrest. Others are now being kept at home by relatives afraid to seek medical help.
Now, with this fear and this lack of recognition of the epidemic, other patients started staying home. Some families were hiding their sick at home. So often the patients who arrive here are in critical condition. You see someone who comes in already bleeding heavily, losing a lot of fluid, vomiting, diarrhea. They are truly in critical condition, and it's at this point that the public starts to raise the alarm.
Health workers say delayed treatment increases the risk of severe illness and makes it more difficult to control the outbreak. Medical teams are also battling false information circulating in affected communities.
Regarding the patients, we cooperate well because someone who is sick, even in isolation, is very cooperative. But we often forget about family members when things get difficult. Some family members understand the epidemic, but others refuse to acknowledge the existence of this illness. So we have to often ignore false rumors, especially those circulating outside the hospital.
The outbreak is linked to the Bundibugyo strain of Ebola. Researchers at Oxford University are developing a vaccine that could enter clinical trials within the next 2 to 3 months. Local health officials said that more than 1,000 suspected Ebola cases have been reported in DR Congo, including 223 suspected deaths that are being investigated.
A high-level visit in West Africa is raising attention after years of strained ties and disrupted trade between two neighbors. Benin's new president, Ramon Wadagni, has traveled to Niger for talks with the country's military leadership in a meeting that could shape future cooperation along a key regional route.
Niger's military leader, General Abdurrahman Tiani, has received Benin's newly elected president, Romuald Wadagni, in Niamey. Wadagni arrived in the Nigerian capital on Tuesday, just over a week after taking office. He was welcomed at Diori Hamani International Airport with military honours, music and dancers waving Beninese flags. Tiani met Wadagni on the tarmac before the two leaders held a brief private meeting. They later travelled to the presidential palace for wider talks with officials from both countries. The visit comes after relations between Benin and Niger deteriorated following Niger's 2023 coup, when Tiani ousted former President Mohamed Bazoum. Border restrictions imposed since then have disrupted trade routes linking landlocked Niger to Benin's ports on the Gulf of Guinea. The talks are expected to focus on bilateral relations, trade and regional cooperation. Neither side immediately released details of the discussions. The visit is also one of Wadagni's first regional engagements since taking office, as his government seeks to manage relations with Niger and the wider military-led Alliance of Sahel states, which includes Mali and Burkina Faso.
Now, a group of young dancers from Uganda are preparing for one of the biggest moments of its journey so far, after earning a place on one of the world's largest sporting stages. Here's more.
The Ugandan dance group known as the Ghetto Kids is preparing for a major international spotlight after being selected by global superstar Shakira to perform alongside her at the FIFA World Cup final halftime show in July.
First of all, it is a dream come true. When we started dancing, by the time we started dancing, we never imagined that we would wake up one time and perform with one of the biggest global artists like Shakira, or perform at the halftime show in USA. We never imagined this, so this is a dream come true.
The group, made up of young performers from Kampala, has risen to global attention through their energetic dance routines and viral performances shared widely on social media. At their rehearsal space in the capital, the children are seen practicing tightly choreographed routines that have helped build their international profile. Formed from orphaned and vulnerable children, the group has become one of Uganda's best-known dance acts, aiming to promote a positive image of Africa through creativity, resilience, and talent.
Image I want to put on the stage of Africa is that Africa is not only about bad things only. Africa is a continent of happiness, you understand? So every time we dance, we are putting in a lot of energy, big smiles. It is not that it is scripted, or when you reach here, smile, it is natural. Like, our happiness is real. That's why when someone watches our videos, they start smiling all of a sudden. So the image I want to put there is that Africa is a good continent, full of joyful people and very hardworking people. And the image I want to put there, the other image, is that Africans can do anything.
The group's origins go back to 2014, when they first gained recognition after appearing in a music video by a Ugandan artist, which went viral online. The Ghetto Kids are set to join Shakira on stage on July 19th, marking a major milestone in their journey from local performers to the global stage.
Now, the fuel crisis in many parts of Africa has sparked renewed calls for the continent to become more self-sufficient when it comes to energy. Even though many African countries are major oil producers, the continent still relies heavily on imported refined fuels.
Africa's crude oil production is dominated by four heavyweights. Nigeria is the largest oil producer in sub-Saharan Africa, pumping over 1.6 million barrels per day and holding massive reserves of light low sulfur crude. Libya is home to the largest proven oil reserves on the continent, with over 48 billion barrels. It regularly produces over 1.3 million barrels per day, despite occasional political disruptions. Algeria produces more than 1 million barrels per day, serving as a major energy supplier to Europe via both oil and natural gas. Angola is a major sub-Saharan producer, churning out roughly 1 million barrels per day. But when it comes to energy, Africa is not just prolific in fossil fuels. The continent also holds 60% of the world's best solar resources alongside massive wind and hydropower potential. Yet it utilizes less than 6% of its solar capacity, and a staggering 85% of its hydropower is untapped. The International Energy Agency says high interest rates make green projects expensive to finance, and local electricity grids are too weak to distribute the power. The result is a painful economic reality. Because Africa lacks processing power, it exports its raw crude and spends billions importing refined fuel. The continent imports an estimated 1.5 to 2 million barrels of refined petroleum products every day, mostly from the Middle East. Economists say it's a cycle that costs African economies over $80 billion annually. But are the tides finally shifting? In West Africa, Nigeria's game-changing 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery has successfully scaled up operations. Already, it's taking care of nearly 80% of the country's domestic petrol import needs this year. Angola is reportedly pushing similar downstream projects. Skeptics worry these multi-billion-dollar oil projects are coming too late as the world transitions to green energy. However, East African leaders say they cannot wait. At a recent summit, a joint regional refinery was mooted for the Tanzanian port city of Tanga. It aims to pool resources and refine crude from Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan, and the DRC.
All right, that's all we have today on African News. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.